Welcome back to my channel, and since Bennett is on the current Dia banner, I decided that it was time to make an updated Bennett guide. He was known as the best character in the game for a while, but with the release of Dendro, Xingqiu slowly took his spot. But he's still in my top 3, and being top 3 is still really good. There have been some changes to his build, especially on the free-to-play side, ever since we got Sumeru, so I think this video is worth making. First of all, Bennett is a character that fills so many roles, and this is what makes him broken. He is a healer, a character that gives a huge attack buff, which you will want on most teams, and he's the best pyro battery in the game, which we'll talk about later. Also, he's a 4-star and is in the shop, so you can technically guarantee getting his Constellations. So starting off with his talent, you can basically ignore his basic attacks, as this is only really useful for on-field Bennett with C6, which isn't a very common playstyle. Not saying it's not viable, but it's pretty niche, so we'll focus on the other two. His elemental skill, Passion Overload, has a tap and hold, but you will most likely just be using the tap when using this character. Tapping gives you 2 to 3 pyro particles, while holding gives you a guaranteed 3. Keep in mind that the cooldown of the hold is slightly longer, so as I said, you probably will only be using the tap when using Bennett. For his passive talents, we have Rekindle, which is his first Ascension passive, and it reduces Passion Overload's cooldown so you can spam it even more. And his 4th Ascension passive, Fear Not, further reduces his cooldown when inside his burst. This is why he's such a good battery. You can basically spam E, especially when you're in his burst. You have like less than 1 second cooldown. It feels like this skill doesn't have a cooldown when you're in his burst. And finally, for his burst, Fantastic Voyage, this is the main reason you're using Bennett, and as I said, is why he's really broken. With his burst, he generates a field, and in this field, the active character either gets healed if they're below 70% HP, so he doesn't heal fully, but it is a really good amount, or if they're above 70% HP, the character gains an attack buff based off of Bennett's base attack. This does change with C1, but we'll talk about Constellations later. So why is this so good? Well, at high investment, the amount of attack Bennett is giving to your on-field character is actually really insane. Keep in mind that flat attack or attack percent from artifacts or weapons don't increase this buff. Base attack is the white number when you check your stats, and this is only based off of Bennett's level and the weapon Bennett is using. Speaking of weapons, there are a lot of options. Weapons with high base attack are your priority, followed by weapons that have really good energy recharge. High base attack weapons because this increases the amount of attack your Bennett gives to the rest of the team, and high energy because if your artifacts aren't giving you enough energy recharge to spam his burst, then you can compensate with the weapons. For 5-star options, Mistsplitter and Aquila Favonia will be your best options if you have them, as they both have an insane 674 attack. Mistsplitter is slightly better in my opinion, as you can build him for damage, which is the way I like to play him, and the crit stat on this weapon makes it easier when Aquila's physical damage doesn't really do much. After that, Freedom Sword, Haran, Summit Shaper, and Skyward Blade all have the same base attack, so use whichever one you have. Freedom Sword also gives you a nice buff to the rest of your team, which makes it a slightly better option in my opinion, but you can also just use it on a different character like Kazuha. Skyward Blade is good because it also has energy recharge, which as I said before is a great stat to have for your Bennett. Moving on to 4-star options, Ali Flash is the best 4-star option because of its base attack, but it is a weapon banner exclusive, so not everyone will have access to this weapon. What I would personally recommend is for everyone without a 5-star weapon is to craft the Sapwood Blade, which is the Sumeru craftable, as it has a high base attack, same as Prototype Rancor, which was Bennett's best in slot before Sumeru, but instead of physical damage, it has ER on the substat, so this weapon is actually insanely good for a free-to-play Bennett. Other options would be Black Cliff, but this has the same base attack as Sapwood, and you need to buy it with Star Glitter, so I personally don't like this weapon. Favonius is a great choice as it allows your Bennett to be a better battery, but it does have significantly lower base attack than the other options, so you're gaining battery potential but losing some strength in your buff. Saxord is a weapon I wouldn't recommend because his skill already has a short cooldown, and his weapon would fit more on characters like Xingqiu, Chi-Chi, or Dendro MC. For Bennett's artifacts, there are a couple of options, but for most people, you probably want to use the 4-piece Noblesse. This set gives you a team-wide attack buff and synergizes well with Bennett's burst. If you're using him, you probably want more attack, so this set just doubles down on that buff, giving your team an extra 20% attack for 12 seconds. For pre-AR 45, if you can get at least the 2-piece XL on him for the energy recharge, that would be great, but as soon as you can farm artifacts, I would suggest trying to get the 4-piece Noblesse. Other options would be 4-piece Instructor, which I can see being used in Burning or even Burgeon teams, with Bennett still being the off-field support, as this gives your team a lot of extra EM when triggering reactions. 4-piece Gilded or 4-piece Flower of Paradise Lost with full EM is also viable. If you want to use Bennett as an on-field Burgeon carry, the 4-piece TF is also a viable option for on-field Bennett, allowing you to spam your elemental skill, pair this with someone like Fischl, and he goes kinda crazy. Lastly, we have the 4-piece Crimson or Emblem, which are both viable if you already have a Noblesse user on the team, as this will allow him to do more damage, but he is one of the best Noblesse users in the game, so I don't really ever do this. As I said, I think for most people, you'll be better off with the 4-piece Noblesse. As for the stats, as a child main, I do prefer to build Bennett like a burst DPS rather than just a full healer, because he can vape his burst in the international rotation, but both builds are viable. For most people, you will want to give him enough ER to burst every rotation. I find that 200% is already really good, but going over this number is great as well. For a full healer Bennett, you want energy recharge or HP on the sands, HP on the goblet, and HP or healing bonus on the circlet. This will give you the most healing on Bennett. It's very hard to die when you're standing in his circle. For an invested support, which as I said is the way I like to play him, give him an ER or attack sands, and even EM if he's vaping, pyro damage on the goblet, and a crit circlet. With this build, he heals a little less, but still a very respectable amount. I like this build more since you want to level up your burst talents anyway, you might as well give him some extra damage. For Bennett's constellations, there are some notable constellations, that being his C1, C5, and C6. Let's go through them one by one and I'll tell you what I think of his const. C1 is one of the best constellations in the game. It removes the restriction we talked about in the earlier part of the video, so he heals and buffs your on-field carry unconditionally. It also adds an extra 20% attack to his buff, which is always good. C2 is okay, as it lowers his ER requirement by a little bit, but it doesn't really do much and you're probably not gonna notice it. C3 is just talent levels for his skill, so it allows you to do a little extra damage when building him for damage, but if you're just building him as a healer with HP and healing bonus, then this constellation really doesn't do anything for you. C4 is not that big a deal since I said you'll probably use your top E in most cases, but can be nice for people that use him on field. C5 is great, it increases Bennett's attack buff, and for the crit build will give you more burst damage, which you already know is always good. And finally, C6. Basically, this gives you a pyro infusion and increases the character's pyro damage. For polearm, sword, and claymore users, their normal attacks will be converted to pyro damage if they're standing inside his field, which can be bad for some teams, but it's not as bad as most people say, because the characters that this constellation affect don't even want Bennett on the team most of the time. The pyro damage increase will affect any pyro character, whether or not they're a melee user. So for example, Yoimiya and Yanfei still benefit from the extra pyro damage bonus that this constellation provides. Overall, it's a good constellation in my opinion, and activating it removes the red mark on the character icon, so for your sanity, you probably want to activate it. You might be asking me why I haven't done it if it's an overall upgrade, but really I'm just scared to do it now after holding onto it for so long. Just because constellations can't be reversed after activation, I just don't want to do it. Also for my jungling, it's a very small increase in damage and I don't think it's that worth it. For the teams, I mainly use him in international and this is one of his best teams, but really Bennett makes any team he's on the best team of that character. If they want an attack buffer or a fill slot for pyro support, look no further, just slot in Bennett. But for some fun comps I like other than international, you can pair him with Xiangling and just run this broken 4-star duo with anything and they will probably clear the abyss. International, Rational, National, Intergrational, these teams are staples for Bennett, and I also really like Reverse Melt with Kaya and Rosaria, as they both benefit from his attack buff and can melt with the help of his pyro application and another Anemo unit. Instead of the best teams, I'll just talk about specific synergies. First of all, every single pyro character can use him as a pyro support. Yes, even Hu Tao. Slot him in and he will battery your on-field pyro really well. Sunfire is Bennett with Jean. This uses both their bursts to continuously apply pyro, letting you trigger a lot of extra reactions with Jean and your on-field character, like Raiden, Ayato, and everyone else. Soup is also a team that wants a pyro, Electro, Hydro, and Anemo. In this case, Bennett is the pyro, giving your Hydro and Electro units his attack buff. This team is really flexible and you can make anyone work. I personally use Ayato, Fischl, Kazuha, and Bennett. You can use Yae, you can use Raiden, Xingqiu, Child, Sucrose, literally anyone you want. Bennett is so flexible that even on archetypes that don't necessarily want an attack buff, he's still really good. Like an on-field Burgeon carry with Xingqiu and a Dendro unit, you can build him full EM and use your skill to pop the seeds. You can even run Kazuha Burgeon with Child and Nahida, which is a team I played a lot when Nahida first released, and it is viable. Bennett with Kazuha giving you periodic pyro swirls and giving your Child, who's gonna be your on-field character, the huge attack buff. Kazuha on this team is gonna be the primary Burgeon trigger, and since you're building him full EM anyway, the Burgeons will do a significant amount of damage. Keep in mind that the Burgeon damage does hurt you, but if you're standing in Bennett burst, you'll probably be fine. I've been using Bennett for so long, and I don't ever see him being out of the meta. While we might have teams and metas that don't necessarily want him, when you're looking for an extra unit to fill your team, Bennett will always be a staple option. That concludes my Bennett guide. If you've watched this video up to the end, please do follow me on Twitch as I stream pretty regularly there, and like the video if it was good. I'll leave you guys with a small showcase featuring some of the teams I mentioned, and thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next video.
Power!